even this perception of yours, which is correct, is a new perception. See, if you look at the data for India, India had hardly grown by 1% or 2% per capita income in 300 years until the independence. And after independence, India was growing much faster, because even if you're growing at 2.5 or 3% per year, you're doubling your income in 20 years, 23 years. And here we are, we come from a background where nothing much had happened for hundreds of years. And this perception that India is not performing well according to it is a perception from the late 1980s. And you guys are a new generation. You've got TV, you've got media, you've got internet, so you know what is happening elsewhere. So when you say India is not performing as well as its potential, you're comparing India with East Asia. You're comparing India with Japan, with Korea, China, Singapore. But that's a separate thing. I mean, now that we know that India has underperformed, what could be the reason? I think it's definitely one of the things that has happened is that India is unique. Now we've got many democratic developing countries. But when India started, after independence we started, there were very few democratic countries. I mean, you could count them on your fingertips. Now, when you have a democratic country, what happens is, wherever it pains, it hurts. So, Amartya Sen has written about it. If you look at China, for example, I'm not detracting from what China has achieved, but China's dictatorial system, the Great Leap Forward, which Mao Zedong tried in 1959, millions died. Whereas in India, millions used to die out of famines. But after independence, you haven't had a famine. It's interesting that I'm talking to you in IIT Kanpur. So for you, new generation, it's unacceptable that in today's day and age, why shouldn't someone not get enough to eat? That's a minimum requirement. And I'm not asking for anything much apart from chapatis and dal and rice. But there was a time when even that was not possible. So to cut a long story short, I think what has happened is that India is a caring country. And there are limits to which you can subject the people to sacrifice. Growth is all about that you need to save, you need to invest, you need to have more capital stock. Now, when you have to save for investing, then you have to keep something out of your income which is not for consumption. But as it is, it's a poor country. I have very little income. Now if you tell me save and invest, that's not an easy thing. So as a result, what you'll find that capital formation in India as a proportion of GDP has been much lower than East Asia. And even in this day and age, when you don't have to go very far, you go out of the gate, you will find that people are following very primitive technology. I mean, if you introduce the right kind of technology, you can do magic. But technology, I mean, if I'm putting a rickshaw, cycle rickshaw, you may give me all this lecture that why don't you buy a auto rickshaw? But auto rickshaw costs 1,00,000 rupees. I'm saying it must be costing about 1,00,000. Whereas the rickshaw costs only a few thousand rupees. Where do I get that lakh from? So savings as a proportion of GDP has been much lower. And even now you can see that when it comes to policies, the government is much more, it's a caring society. So we want to take everyone along. It cannot be that you said, no, that doesn't matter. Now you wait. A golden tomorrow is coming. I mean, if my today is very bad, it's little consolation that you come and tell me about that sunhera sapne, dekho. Actually, I have a very simple way of looking at it. People invest not because they love you. People invest because they want to see the opportunity for making money. So the reason why foreign direct investment is low is the same as domestic investment is low. Except for one difference. The difference is that when you invest money in my country, you're not looking so much at what is the dollar rate of return. You're looking at the rupee rate of return. But when a foreigner comes and invests money, he's also worried about the dollar rate of return, which depends on the exchange rate. Okay, so what I'm saying is that investment is low, foreign direct investment is low, for the same reason as investment is low in India. So investment is low because, you can see that, as we discussed just now, that there is shortage of everything. No matter which thing that you talk about, there's shortage of housing, there is a shortage of road, there is a shortage of electricity, there is a shortage of water supply, there is a shortage of healthcare support, there is a shortage of schools, there is a shortage of transportation, storage. So if there is a shortage, then if you invest, you're going to get good return. So why aren't people investing? I think the reason basically are the following. One, that there are problems, obstacles. If getting a permit, getting a license, registering your company, that's a problem, then it's a choro baba. It's not needed. And especially if you're from abroad, why should you come here and suffer? Second, I think the major reason for lack of investment is infrastructure. Now, you are in Kanpur. I've been to Kanpur once only before. This is the first time. You have a hallowed institution of IIT, which is as good as any institution anywhere. But you just go out 100 meters, 200 meters, you're in an urban slum. Now, I may produce cheaper than China, but how do I export? I have to reach my product from Kanpur to Bombay, their port, the transportation facilities. Similarly, housing. Now, if you are a foreigner and you are thinking of investing here, you'd also like to know what kind of housing is available, what about your children's education, school. So I'm a great believer in infrastructure, and we need hard infrastructure, which is roads, ports, airports, water supply, urban facilities, electricity. These are extremely important, and that is in short supply. Now, this is a very interesting question. I think there is a bit of a wastage. Wastage in a way, we train you guys in engineering. Okay. Now, the fact of the matter is that you come through a competitive exam, so the best and the brightest come to IIT. There is also some people who say that boys and girls go to IIT because where else will they go? We don't have good liberal arts. If you want to do philosophy, in IIT when you get a degree, you're recognized all over the world. If you get a degree in philosophy from somewhere, you don't have that kind of recognition. So our boys and girls, the best ones, are going to IIT because that's where the quality education is available. But the fact of the matter is that when we talked about capital and technology, there's so much shortage. Now, after having trained you guys with a lot of care in engineering, for you to say, no, now I'll become a manager. I mean, manager wearing tie and suit, anyone can become. It's more important to have good engineering guys. And here, I think there's something in our culture which I'm saying a slightly provocative thing, which is anti-engineering. And if you think of the caste system, if you are giving lectures in philosophy and so on, you are considered to be very good. But if you are a mundane guy who is inventing some kind of hybrid banana, I believe Vishwamitra had invented quite a few things, including a banana and including a fast-growing rice variety. But that is not valued so much in my country as if you become a philosopher, a logician, or you become a mathematician. That needs to change. That's the reason I believe we haven't done much in terms of innovation. I mean, why couldn't India produce electric bulbs, electricity or steam engine? We haven't. Okay. But now you can't, after getting a degree, you can't change the country right away. If the country changes, you can change yourself. So, if you are trained in a rigorous way, and once you are trained in a rigorous way, you can take up any subject you like. So I'm not surprised that IITians are doing well by moving into finance, because in many such subjects you have a lot of requirement for mathematics and logical thinking, so that you are capable of, so you're doing it. But my hope and wish is that I want to see more IITians, going into engineering, going into innovation. I mean, why can't we have a Bill Gates from India? Why couldn't we have a Steve Jobs from India? Why can't we have a guy who says, okay, now I've found a photovoltaic solar panel, which doesn't need lithium, the battery. Rather than that, you are becoming CFO of some company. Anyone can become a CFO, but anyone cannot invent a new solar panel. Young entrepreneur, can it be nurtured? Yes, it can be nurtured. But in a way, either you have it or you don't. And so first thing is, I think, hunger. I always believe that though we say a lot of things about greedy businessmen, but when you think of the people who change the world in a way. Thomas Edison or Carnegie, you have it in you. By making more money, instead of making $5 million per year, if you make $50 million, doesn't mean you will eat, instead of 5 chapatis, you will eat 15 chapatis. And there's a limit to how much money you can spend. So it's the urge to create. It's the urge to see that you are a successful entrepreneur. So one is entrepreneurship is a lot of industry. I personally believe that business is much more difficult than the job. When you are my salaried employee, you come at 9 o'clock, you go at 5 o'clock. After 5 o'clock, you're not worried. Until 9 o'clock, you're not worried. But if I'm a businessman, I'm 24/7. I'm all the time thinking about it. That's one. Second, if you think of good entrepreneurs, they're also good innovators. Because ultimately, if what you are doing is something that even others can do, you bring in something special. That special is very important. But beyond that, I think you are asking me the wrong question. If I had it in me, I would have been an entrepreneur myself. The fact that I'm not an entrepreneur means I don't have it and I don't know it. And it will be foolish on my part to claim that I took the decision. Because when it comes to such a large country, so many people, every decision has got its roots in previous government, even government previous to that, because there are generations who are thinking about this problem. But two of the things in which I was associated, I wouldn't claim that I am responsible. One is the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, and the other is Value-Added Tax. That was introduced. I'll tell you why it is so. Sometimes we believe that economics is like magic. The rules that apply to your mother, for example, she's running the household. If she wants to invest, if she wants to buy a new washing machine, she has to save. You can't do it by just borrowing, spending more than what you earn. But in economics, there is a belief that you can do something. The Keynesian economics, for example, it is true. But it is true in a way, but there are limits. Yeah. Just as a householder, your mother has to cut her coat according to the cloth. Similarly, a country also has to live within its means. Otherwise, you can run into balance of payments problems, you run into inflation. So, for a long time, we have been following very expansionary fiscal policies. As a result, again, all of you are born after 1991. So you are lucky guys. We grew up with endemic foreign exchange problem. Every so many years, rupees, there's no foreign exchange, rupees depreciating. Whereas beyond 1991, we don't have any problems. We have problems, but we don't have any balance of payments problems for which you have to go with a begging bowl to the IMF or to other countries. So that's FRBM. The second is the value-added tax. Value-added tax, previously what we had was sales tax. Now, sales tax, what happens is that it's distortionary. Why is it distortionary? Because I produce balti. So you sell aluminium sheets to me. You collect sales tax and give it to the government. You charge it to me. So that sheet has got sales tax built into it. So my Balti cost has got that aluminium sheet cost. So there is tax is included in my Balti cost, and I charge a margin and I charge a tax. So there is tax on tax. So value added taxes, you don't pay tax on the inputs on which you have taxes already paid. So that was the value added. And that was a source of great satisfaction that I was involved in both. It's a difficult question. I'll tell you that I more or less, without knowing much about economics, or to the subject matter of economics is, I decided pretty early on, maybe early 60s, or maybe even 58, 59. So we are all post-independence generation. The only thing I know, I had heard some vaguely, Germany and Japan were completely devastated by the war. And Dr. Adenauer was the leader of Germany. And Germany was rebuilding itself, so was Japan. But Japan was not as developed as Germany before the war. But Germany was developed. And everyone used to talk about Dr. Adenauer. I didn't know what economics is. I thought it's some kind of magic. So you learn it and then you do magic, then the country gets transformed. That's how it started. Much later did I realize what it's all about. But the problems were quite acute in our younger days. For you, it's very difficult to even understand it. In the early 60s, for example, we had 2 successive droughts. And it's so interesting. And rice was not available. Mind you, just as the North Indians will die if you don't give them chapatis for a few days, the Eastern Indians and South Indians will die if you don't give them rice for a few days. And rice was not available. So we are coming from that kind of background. So economics, since it dealt with rupees and paise, I thought it's some magic art. Yeah.
Okay, sir. That's good.
It's a very complex issue. So I was talking about the rice shortage. Even wheat was in short supply. There was statutory rationing. Now, actually, it's the other way around. Does it mean that there is no hunger problem? There is still hunger problem. There are some people still in my country who are not starving to death, but maybe who, if you gave them a choice, they would eat a few more chapatis or a little more rice. In such a situation, what you have is surplus production. So you have much more buffer stock than what you need. Now this shows a disconnect. In a country where you have shortage of food, you have plenty of food rotting in the... So naturally, the problem is there, and the root of the problem is, you look at agriculture as a proportion of GDP. So agriculture as a proportion of GDP, when we were children in the 50s, it used to be 50% of GDP. Now it is 16, 17% of GDP. In the developed countries, agriculture is 3% of GDP, 2% of GDP. And 16% of GDP comes from agriculture, but what is the proportion of people dependent on agriculture? 45%. So if you have 45 out of your 100 people dependent on a sector which produces only 16 out of 100 rupees income, that means about 3 times the proportion of people who are dependent on agriculture is 3 times the proportion that comes from agriculture. then deprivation is natural. So what we need is increase in productivity. We don't need so many people to produce agriculture. Today's technology, today's what can be done. But you need alternative employment. So people are talking of a loan waiver. Why is it bad? Loan waiver because what are you doing? There are many problems with loan waivers. Loan waivers, firstly, he didn't take a loan from a bank. You did. Now when you waive the loan, he feels like a fool. That why did I not take a loan? He took a loan and it has been waived off. Similarly, you are a good guy. You have been repaying the loan. He hasn't. When loan is waived, you will feel like a fool. Ki kya buddhu main hu. So it destroys the culture. Second, the loan waiver, who has given the loan? The government hasn't given the loan. The loan has been given by banks and financial institutions. When loan is waived, the government tells these banks that don't collect the money, we will give it to you. But they give it, the government also doesn't give it overnight. It takes a few years. In the meantime, if you haven't returned my money, will I ever lend to you? So the credit culture is affected. So many people claim loan waiver is not the solution to the problem. However, the other solutions are more difficult. So at least loan waiver, some farmers are happy, but it has acquired a political overtone. It's become very, and just as you are desperate before an exam, politicians are desperate before an election, because it's a matter of reappointment. I mean, they're applying for reappointment. Whether the reappointment will come through or not is absolutely critical for them. So just as you put in a few hours, extra hours of study, they put in extra effort to see what can win them votes. So now you will see every political party is talking about farm waiver. No political party has stood up and said, no, we are against it. So it's a Frankenstein, it's a genie which once it comes out of the bottle, it's very difficult to put it back.